I never expected to see the day that I thought this would be necessary, but today I'm improving the security on the Homestead with the contents of this box. But before I show you what's in this box and what I need to do to make this project work, why do I feel like I need to beef up security when I already live basically in the middle of nowhere with almost no neighbors around me in a rural setting like this? Well, it's things like the Taylorsha business incident that happened less than 35 miles of where I live, and our government that clearly does not take the safety of our own U.S. citizens seriously. Now, the moment we tell ourselves we have absolutely nothing to worry about, especially those of us who live in a rural setting, is the exact moment we leave ourselves vulnerable and unprepared. And about 8 years ago, before my house was even built, somebody actually vandalized my property and left deep tire ruts in my newly planted lawn around my parents' shed and where my house currently sits now. And I'm not talking just like they drove through my yard. They did figure eights and donuts. The lawn was completely destroyed, and I was out about $600. So after that incident, we ended up installing a security system on our shed. And it's still in use today, but it's severely limited because the cameras are fixed, and that doesn't really do me a lot of good now that I have a house up here, and that's a problem for me. That's where today is going to be a game changer for me, because inside of this box is a Wi-Fi pan tilt zoom security camera, and that's not even the best part. This thing also has a solar panel, so it is truly a wireless system. However, this isn't going to be just a straightforward install, because I can't stand the thought of drilling holes or using any permanent fasteners on my house, and it's probably the reason why it's taken me so long to actually get around to this project. Just waiting for the right product to come along that I could try out one day. So if you're anything like me, then you're not going to want to miss this as I install this security camera system somewhere along this decorative beam so it's discreet and without using any screws or drilling holes into the house.
So I got to work building the most simplistic bracket I could think of for my camera's mounting plate. And not only did I have to find a way to mount this system without putting holes in the beam, I needed a way to mount this thing to give me the best camera angles possible. If I mounted the fixture plate directly to the beam, I only had two options. One, the camera would have been mounted on the inside of the beam and facing the house. It would have been almost undetectable, but my viewing area would have been severely limited to just my front door. Two, the camera would have been mounted on the outside of the beam and it would have stuck out like a sore thumb. To make things even more complicated, the camera wouldn't have hung far enough below the beam and it wouldn't have had enough range of motion to see my front door, which would have defeated the purpose of this whole project. To make this project even more complicated, I needed to prime and paint my bracket to make it blend in with my house. However, initially I didn't have any paint even remotely close to the color of my house, and I started getting knots in my stomach just thinking of what I needed to tear off my house to get some color matched paint made up. But then I was digging around in my garage and I happened to find this aluminum downspout band just laying around. If you notice the two screws that are sticking out of the block of wood, well, I have a plan for those, and I made sure that they were short enough to be well anchored into the wood, but not so long that they would break through to the other side. The worst part is, I haven't had a chance to experiment with anything like this because I've never done anything like this before.
If you're wondering how I plan to attach that bracket to the inside of the beam, well, the answer is probably not as complicated as you might think. And maybe you've already guessed it. It's the way I hang everything inside my house. Command strips. Unfortunately, I don't have three hands, so I wasn't able to hold the GoPro and record this at the same time, but I have my bracket now located up here with the fixture plate here in the front, which the camera attaches to, and the command strips are doing a really good job of holding on to this. I don't think anything is going to be that heavy. Those are pretty heavy duty command strips. They're supposed to be good for up to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which we don't typically get that cold in the winter time. And if we do, it's usually because there's wind chill incorporated. And now I'm going to show you what these two screws are actually for. I have a piece of nylon string with two slip knots tied to each end wrapped around the heads of those screws. When we had our Cleary shed built, we had some leftover sheet metal screws with the little flat washers on them, and they're almost the exact color of the reds that are on my house. So I took one of those screws and then I threaded it into one of the wall anchors that came with the security cam kit just to flare it out a little bit. I'm just going to wrap the nylon string around this screw and put it in between the washer and that wall anchor. I'm going to use the ribs of my soffit as another anchor point. Now these strings are nice and taut, and I have just a little bit of extra support so I don't have all that down pressure just hanging on the command strips. Now all I have to do is mount the camera. Now that we've got everything fully secured, locked into place, I have the room for my Wi-Fi antennas up here. All I have to do is plug in our solar panel to the bottom of the power input to the bottom of the camera. That way this thing can recharge. Looking up here at the roof, mounting options for the solar panel are pretty limited. However, I think I have an idea. Now, I know it's not pretty, it's temporary at best, but it's a solution, and I think it's going to work.
Looking back at what I did here, I still might notch out this piece of wood for the gutter hanger just to make sure I'm not putting too much stress on that plastic pedestal for the solar panel, but I also need to make sure I don't notch it too deep, that I don't have enough tension on the gutter hanger.
There, I told you it might not be pretty, but it's going to work. I'm pretty sure. Water's gonna be able to flow underneath here, and it's just a piece of wood. And if anything eventually rots off or falls off, hopefully the solar panel just falls right into the gutter.
Since we're about 45 degrees north of the equator, the instructions are telling me that I should be pointing my solar panel about 45 degrees to the south to compensate. So I'm up here just doing the best that I can with a speed square, trying to eyeball 45 degrees and whatever looks about due south. But I'm still not entirely convinced this is actually going to work. If you notice behind me, it's quite sunny outside. But if you're looking at where I'm working right now, it's kind of shady. And that's because
if you look at where this thing is located, it's really not in an ideal spot, at least not in my opinion. It's basically at the bottom of a valley beneath all of the peaks, and I'm just not sure if I'm going to get enough sunlight to activate the solar panel and be able to charge the security system. However, there really isn't anything else that I can do because I don't have a power cable from the solar panel long enough that I could just put the solar panel on the back side of the roof where there are no obstructions. And honestly, that would be a really bad idea because I would have an extraordinarily long length of cable running up and down the roof. And it's nothing for us to have 20 to 30 mile an hour sustained winds up here. So I really don't want that flopping around up there. And there's no way I'm fastening it to the roof just to create some sort of pinhole leaks where they don't belong. Now, the one thing that I know for sure is that the camera is only charged up to 92%. So it'll be really interesting to see if the solar panel is actually located well enough to be able to at least maintain the charge or even put a little extra charge into the system, which would be the ideal scenario. But before we get into more detail on that, I want to show you exactly how I've got this all set up to keep it as hidden as possible. So from the solar panel, I ran the wire down. I used 2 command clips just to keep it somewhat secure to the soffit until I got up to the F channel here. And then I tucked the wire in between the F channel and the bottom soffit panel here all the way to the corner, wrapped it under the beam to try and keep it as discreet as possible. Came around the back side, went and did the same thing between the F channel and the soffit, and then wrapped it over the top of my bracket and came down underneath, and there's our power supply. Now we have to see if the camera is, well, functioning and seeing what we want it to actually see. From the looks of it, the location of the camera is going to be even better than I thought because I can see my front door and my service door to the garage, which were the 2 main points of entry I wanted to cover. But I can see a whole lot more of my garage apron and even part of the driveway than I expected to be able to see. If there is something off the screen I want to see, all I have to do is simply swipe over with my finger and I can pan the camera over to a different location. And I can even zoom in or I can zoom out if I want to see something in more detail. I need to make sure that this thing is charging because if it's not, the whole system is going to fail. So I'm going to take you over to that battery page and we're going to see what the charging status is. So I've had this thing up for a few days now just because I wanted to track the solar charging capability, and it looks like from the graph it's showing that the battery charge goes anywhere from about 95% up to 100%. So I have to say I'm very impressed the location of the solar panel is actually working. Now I have a sense of security and preparedness knowing that I can see exactly what's going on outside whether I'm in or away from my home. Make sure you check out this next video right here to see one of the coolest and fastest tree removal tools we have on the Homestead.